It's time for 41 is the Mic, a weekly Chiefs podcast with Nick Jacobs of KSHB 41 and Matt Derrick of Chiefs Digest. 41 is the Mic starts now.
Welcome, everyone, back to another episode of 41 is the Mic. I am Matt Derrick alongside grilling enthusiast Nick Jacobs. Nick's the 4th of July. Of course, I mean, if you can't tell, what's the t-shirt say?
Yeah, you can't spell sausage without USA.
There you go.
Do it, and it's 100% accurate from a spelling perspective.
Can't think of anything more America than that, Nick.
Hey, it's a t-shirt. I like it. We're gonna roll with it.
How did you spend your 4th of July?
I was with family. Yeah, I had to reflect for a minute. I was like, "Yep, I was around family." had a hot dog and hamburger.
I made hot dogs here at the house alongside with some homemade baked beans from brother-in-law Rich's recipe. So those came out fantastic. So big barbecue bean enthusiast over here, Nick.
Yeah. My mom made some of her barbecue beans and her potato salad, so they were great as always.
I couldn't make them like the smokehouse because I didn't have any burn ends, but Rich's recipe has bacon in it, so it's just as good.
Yeah, I like that Rich's recipe. Sounds like a fancy title.
It is kind of a fancy title. Well, Nick, we're 9 days away from training camp starting, which, I mean, this is like being 9 days away from Christmas for me, because it's you got all the enthusiasm, you got the excitement. There's a slow build going on right now, Nick. I mean, but this is the week, once you get from the 4th of July and you get to the Monday right now before training camp starts, this is kind of when things start getting back to normal for me, because everybody's getting back to work. I mean, players will start slowly rolling back in from wherever they might be, whether it's the stands in Wimbledon or the stages in London, wherever it is that you are, or on a beach in Cancun. Everybody's going to be coming back in slowly but surely. Might even see, hey, Chiefs have a roster spot. They might even fill it this week. Who knows? Now that everybody's back in the country or getting back in Kansas City. It's still a slow week, Nick. So there's not a lot going on. But we've got a pretty fun topic that we've been discussing, and this is what we're talking about this week. Nick and I pretty much basically talk about all the time. I mean, this is kind of every time that we talk, we probably touch on this subject a little bit, because one of the things that we love, and we're definitely a big fan of, and I know from hearing from a lot of you too, I think that this is a big interest of yours as well. It's about roster building, and it's about managing the cap. But, and Nick, you were inspired with this idea from a little bit of watching Hard Knocks with the New York Giants in the first episode. But, it's one thing that we often talk about is, hey, you got to kind of you want to sign extensions. And this year, the Chiefs, with signing contract extensions with your big three, guys that off the rookie deals from 2021, with Creed Humphrey, Nick Bolton, and Trey Smith, talk about trying to get those deals done. But the Chiefs have other free agents in the next 18 months that are going to be coming up, either, immediately after this season. In January, you can start focusing on the 2022 draft, in which the Chiefs only have 9 players from that draft class that are eligible for extensions. These are the things that Brett Veach and his staff deal with all year round, because you have to massage the salary cap. You can't make a deal now without looking at 2026 and seeing how are you going to be able to afford this contract and pay Trent McDuffie and George Karlaftis and try and keep Leo Chenal. I mean, you've got a lot of things going on. So that's what we started with. Our premise is that we kind of wanted to take a look at where the Chiefs stand right now, looking at their free agent class, not only immediately, but also after this season, going into next year, the decisions that really, if you're Brett Veach, you got to think with the next 18 months in mind, because as much as Chiefs fans might be focusing on a three-peat, Brett Veach is focusing on a four-peat. That's what his staff is looking at, because they want to keep this train moving, Dick. And, where for you is the best place to start? Because I'll say this for me. I mean, to me, there's like 3 groups of free agents that you're kind of looking at every year. you have, and with unrestricted free agents, you've got, and I should say four groups of free agents. Within veteran free agents, you got two groups. One's your 5 years plus free agents, guys who are going to be on their maybe third deal or more. Um, Justin Reed, Harrison Butker, good examples of those coming up. You've got your rookie contracts coming up, which in this case, Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, Nick Bolton, Noah Gray in that group for this year. Then after that, you've got restricted free agents, which, not as normally a big deal because usually it's a tender offer, but Chiefs in the next couple of years are going to be having some restricted free agents that they might have some interesting decisions on. Um, and then exclusive rights free agents, which, those are somewhat automatic. I mean, these are guys with less than 3 years of experience. No other team can sign them. You have exclusive rights to offer them. As long as you offer them a minimum amount, you get to pretty much keep them. So that's a little bit, less fancy, but still decisions that the teams have to make. So, with that in mind and looking towards 2025, the Chiefs have a lot of guys. There are a lot of free agents because the Chiefs have a lot of guys on 1 year deals or at the end of deals. They're going to have to make decisions, like James Winchester, they assigned to an extension. He's going to be 37, I think, after the season. They've got some other guys on 1 year deals. Hollywood Brown might be a guy we talk about trying to extend and what his number might be. But no doubt, Nick, I mean, the big three to start with is that rookie class. Because if you're the Chiefs, I mean, your dream scenario is that you want Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Nick Bolton staying with this team, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's the biggest question we've been getting asked on every Q&A is when does Nick Bolton resign? When does Creed Humphrey resign? Does Trey Smith resign? Like that's the one you and I consistently get each week on Q&A during this after the draft. After the draft is over, that's been the number one question you and I get each week. So then you and I were like, hey, let's just do a podcast where we address all that collectively and we do a more encompassing thing where people realize that there's more than just those three that the Chiefs are going to have to make decisions on and that they're going to have to juggle over the next couple years. So the first thing I'm going to throw out here, just so people know this part of it, is good general managers are looking 3 years ahead, both in terms of cap of what they've got and also kind of who do they mark down as the ones that they have to get done, and then who are the people that they're okay if they need to replace, and then they ask, do they have a replacement for them through draft or somebody they may be signed a year in advance or something. So this is the first part of it that I want to get through is the Chiefs cap space right now. The Chiefs cap space headed into next year is going to be 13.3 million estimated based on that. The Chiefs right now at this moment have 15.425 that everybody wants to burn to re-sign people to extensions. Now, if the Chiefs carry that over and whatever money they have that'll get reduced down there, in a best case scenario, they have 28.7 million cap space wise based on the current projection. So under that, they could get handled. They could retain their own. They're probably not going to go out and get a lot of people on the free agent market, but they could more than likely retain their own. Then you look at 2026. When I went there, that cap space is projected at 88, almost $89 million. But here's the kicker. The money is tied up into Patrick Mahomes at $68.6 million, Chris Jones at $41.1 million, Jawan Taylor at $24.7 million, and Mike Dana at $11.1 million. Those are their top four people that are getting paid at that point. So there's adjustments that they would need to make, and we can get to that a little bit later. And then I let's see here. Then I went down to 2027 because I'm looking out that much in advance. The Chiefs are projected to have $202 million in cap space, but the reason they do is because there's only 9 guys on the roster. And so that means most of that 2022 draft class is gone. And the two key players that are making money at that point is Mahomes and Jones. And then, you're looking at free agency wise, you're looking at Rice and FAU, Wanye Morris, Chamari Connor, Nick Jones. Those would be your guys that you're kind of having to make decisions on that year. So that's not as far off as you think it is, from their rookie contracts to then. So there's a lot that you're kind of estimating and you're looking at overall. But I think probably the first place we can probably start is, what do we think financially Creed, Bolton, and Trey would need? So Matt, if you want to go first, feel free.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean, one is automatic to me, which is that I think you can make Creed Humphrey obviously the highest paid center in the
Yep.
league comfortably, and not have any worries whatsoever. I mean, the Frank Ragnow is the highest paid center right now. His average of what, 13.5.
Yep.
I think Jason Kelsey actually had the one deal that was higher than that. I think it was his 14.5
It's pretty
on
close.
that 1 year deal. I mean, there was a retirement tax, paid in there by the Eagles to keep him. The only, maybe asterisk next to Creed is that he's going to be 27 next year. And he's a little old for his class. He was a little older when he was coming out. But other than that, I mean, Creed Humphrey's done everything that you want. So to me, if you made him the highest paid center in the league, and the highest paid center, what does that look like? I mean, $70 million over probably 5 years, which I would have no problem signing Creed Humphrey to a 5 year deal. That'd be $14 million a year, which would be $500,000 more than Ragnow's making right now. $35 million guaranteed. I have no problems making that deal, especially when you think about the fact that, I mean, if Trey Smith ended up being even a top 10 paid guard, he's going to make more than that. So, I mean, Creed Humphrey, if I shoved that in front of him right now, one, I think he'd sign it. I would like to think he would sign it. And two, I mean, I don't think there's any reason not to put that kind of a deal in front of him.
Yeah, with Creed, whenever I was looking at his numbers and comparing them to the other two, I mean, like you said, like center's the easiest market to be able to max out at right now among the three options you have available. And like you said, with Frank Ragnow, he's 28. He's going to be 28 he's 28 with the Lions. His APY per year, like you said, 13.5 million. His fully guaranteed is 27.9 million. So you're going to have to go above that. And then total guarantees is if it reaches everything hypothetically possible, it's 42 million. So what I had estimate wise for Creed at 27, and I looked at the competition that's going to be in the market next year. If he did hit free agency, the guy he's potentially going against is Josh Myers of the Packers, who was drafted the same year, and he's 27 as well. And then Ryan Kelly, who the Colts may let hit the market, he's 32. So those are the top. Creed and Josh Myers and Ryan Kelly right now are the projected top centers headed into that free agency class. So I think rough estimate wise for Creed, I'm just mentally preparing for 15 million APY per year, because that'll make the agent happy because it gets above Ragnow at a comfortable level. It moves the market. And then I could see somewhere around like 30 million fully guaranteed, maybe a little bit more. And then I would assume probably somewhere around 50 million in total guarantees, like you said, over a potential like 5 year contract, if you want to stretch it out to that point, because then that gets Creed to 32 years old, and you don't have any issues at that point. And then how you structure it is how you structure it. But yeah, no, I think center's the easiest one to get done comfortably and financially.
Yeah, we're pretty close there. I mean, I'm once again, I had no troubles going to 15. I'm giving him half of it guaranteed no matter what. I mean, that should be a pretty easy no-brainer. That's kind of market value right there. Looks like we're pretty much in agreement on what you would pay
Sure.
Creed. With Trey Smith, that's a more difficult question because the guard market just absolutely, from a buyer's perspective, Nick, absolutely stinks. If you're a player right now, it's great to be a guard.
Yeah. Yeah, because when I looked at all the potential free agents next year, Trey is going to be the top one at left guard or right guard. So if you're wanting an offensive guard, a starting offensive guard, like Trey's going to be at the top of that list. And if he's able to attach a Pro Bowl to his name, that really puts him at the max earning value. That's going to be the key for him. And I mean, Trey's going to be 20 going in there, he's 26 years old in that regard, to where like he's going to get top dollar. And like the guys he's going against right now is Landon Dickerson, who's at 21 million APY per year. Cole Beasley, who's at 20 million APY per year. Trey Smith, who's at 27 million APY per year. And like the guys he's going against right now is Landon Dickerson, who's at 21 million APY per year. 28.89 fully guaranteed. Chris Lindstrom from the Falcons, who's 27, he's at a 20.5 APY per year and 48.2 million guaranteed. Then Robert Hunt from the Panthers at 28 just signed his deal, and he's not at Trey's level in my book. Panthers overpaid him at 20 million APY per year, 44 million fully guaranteed. So the question will be, who is a guard needy team next year that really wants to kind of have somebody like Trey set the tempo, a 2-time Super Bowl champion, maybe 3-time at that point, and what can he do to be a leader along that offensive line? So that'll be the big number. So for me, Matt, I'll start it and then you come back with yours, like the Price is Right. With Trey, I think best case scenario for the Chiefs is you're looking at 21 to 23 million APY per year. If you did the deal, you're gonna have to do that much. But if he hits open market, I could see a team needing to burn some money and paying him 25 per year. I don't know if some team will go 4 million over APY, but it wouldn't stun me if a team didn't, because I didn't think the Bears would pay what they have to some linebackers like Tremaine Edwards that we'll talk about next. But the Bears will overpay because they need to get guys to come to their team that can help kind of raise that culture that they're trying to build there. So with Trey, like I said, I could see 21 to 23 APY, especially if he hits the open market. I could see it leaning more the other way in terms of 23, 24, 25. And then I think if he does hit the market, I think he's going to be getting 50 million guaranteed without a blink of an eye. So for those that are trying to think of that in terms of a 5-year contract, which would be the standard for most teams, that's 5 years, 125 million is what he could hypothetically get up to. If you do it at 21 APY per year, you're looking at 105. So he's likely going to get $100 million contract on the open market if it's a 5-year type of deal at minimum.
Yeah, and for me, when you look at, the biggest deal out there right now is Chris Lindstrom, 5 years, 102.5. For Trey, that's a lot. Blowing the market that much and going up over Dickerson's 21 million per. You're right. There's not going to be a ton of competition. He's going to be the best combination of talents, performance and age in the next year's free agent class. Then there's the other side of it. There's the other side, which is that there are going to be some teams that may still have Trey Smith as a guy that they're not considering because, they're concerned about the medical history from college, even though it looks like the blood clots are completely behind him. Feels very comfortable with that. He's obviously, the Chiefs have not had any problems whatsoever. Now, hey, he had some injuries that dinged him up last year. He played through them. You should get credit for that. But in this league, you're also going to have some people saying, well, no, his performance maybe wasn't what it was in the previous year. So, and if you're the Chiefs and you've already are paying market, top of the market value for your quarterback and defensive tackle, and you've got some other decisions to make. To me, and this is me being is someone who respects Trey Smith more than anybody. Making him a top 10 highest paid guard is about as high as I could go. So, if I'm the Chiefs, 3 years, 51 million, 25 guaranteed, 17 million per, 30 million guaranteed. That, or practical guarantee, that to me would be, it's the best case scenario to me for Trey Smith to keep him in Kansas City. Because I think like you're talking about at 20 to 25, Trey Smith is playing for somebody else. If he's playing in Kansas City, it's going to have to be at a below market deal. And if I'm Trey, I wouldn't sign a Trey for 3 market deal, especially if I've got 2 or 3 Super Bowl rings. That's a factor that goes into these deals.
Yeah, and then the question the Chiefs are going to have to ask themselves is, when this time next year, whether it's with Creed or with Trey, is what are they going to do with Joe Thuney's contract? Because for people that don't know, Joe Thuney's cap hit next year is 26.9 mil. And if they just outright release him, they're going to get 16 million back. And we don't know where he's at right now. We don't know how he did after the pec injury. So watching him this year, the team's going to be evaluating that just as much as fans and media will be about if that number he's at is going to be worth it for the long term of what they're attempting to do. So you hypothetically could use that money to basically just move to Creed or to move to, Trey, and then you still pay Creed. Those are possibilities that I'm sure they're discussing. And like you said, there's certainly a threshold number that the Chiefs are probably at for both of those potential contracts to get done, because we're still going to get to Nick Bolton and a handful of other guys on next year's roster, and that's going to cut into the pie pretty quickly. And there's a reason the Chiefs went and got Hansen and got Hunter Norzad, is because they're bracing for these potential scenarios depending on where the numbers end up at.
Yeah, that was the next thing I was getting ready to add, is that if you look at team moves, and especially with Brett Veach, and we're talking about thinking 18 to 36 months in advance, you don't, and well, one, you don't draft Derrick Kennard, you don't invest in like a guy like Mike Caliendo the way that they have, you don't draft two center guards this year without thinking to yourself, okay, in 24 I might be replacing two starters. I mean, that's the exact same thing that the Chiefs did with all of the defensive backs that they selected. I mean, you don't select that many corners, in a couple of seasons in 22 and 23 the way that you did, unless you're looking at the fact that, you know what, we're not going to be able to keep L'Jarius Sneed. We're going to have multiple spots to fill. And we're going to have to talk about another free agent here in a few minutes for next year that, I mean, when you're the Chiefs and you've drafted Brian Cook, Jamari Connor, and Jaden Hicks 3 years in a row, I think you probably have the writing on the wall for another decision too. So we'll get to that one, but let's deal with Bolton, because that's going to be the other tough one. Because the same things that I said about Trey Smith are absolutely true about Nick Bolton too. Played at a very high level when healthy. Last year, the injury certainly slowed him down. Teams will be worried about that. So he needs to come back, both for Trey and Nick. I mean, the biggest things for them this year is that they would love to have injury-free seasons in their contract year. I think both those guys, if they are injury-free in their contract season, should absolutely be playing lights out. And if that's the case, Nick Bolton is going to make things very, very difficult for the Chiefs, because Nick, I mean, there's the linebacker market is very peculiar. You've basically got three guys living in the penthouse. You have Patrick Queen, and then you have the middle class. Mm-hmm. I mean, and then so it's like, where does Nick Bolton fit in?
Yeah. Because the first part of it is, like you said, Roquan Smith and the Ravens, 27 years old, 20 million APY per year, 45 million fully guaranteed is the estimate. Fred Warner, 49ers, 28 years old. He's at 19 million APY per year, 27.5 million fully guaranteed. Then you have Tremaine Edwards, the Bears, at 26 years old. He's at 18 million APY per year, 41.8 million fully guaranteed. Bears, in my book, overpaid on that one, then kind of reset the market with that number. So then the question becomes, going into next year, Nick Bolton's gonna be 20. Nick Bolton's 25. His main competition is going to be Dre Greenlaw, who I believe is going to be coming off the Achilles from the 49ers, and is going to probably need a prove it type of deal. And then you've got Devin White, who is going to have his deal voided with the Eagles. So those are going to be his two competition, and we'll see where Greenlaw's at that point, if he's able to make his way back. Because if I remember correctly, wasn't he was the linebacker who fell down at the Super Bowl?
Yep.
There, yeah. So like, he's going to need a strong December and January to really kind of set his market if he's able to get back at that point. And even then, it may be 2 years before he gets back, and he may not get the top dollar to where Bolton maybe gets more than him, because Greenlaw's having to reprove some things. And then Devin White's going to be more athletic in terms of coverage. So it wouldn't stun me for Bolton if his agent is asking for anywhere between 14 to 16 million APY and trying to see if he can get that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I can see them being like, hey, you shoot for the moon and you shoot for 2021. But I think likely you're probably trying to find something between 14 to 16, and at minimum you're trying to find 25 million guaranteed range to where that's where you end up being comfortable. But for his agent, you really want to do that on a 3-year deal to get him back on the market at 28. If you can. If you can find a team that's willing to pay that number and do it over a 3-year deal with either a void in the 4th year or something like that to be able to get him back on the market before he turns 30.
Yeah. And I mean, once again, we talk about one move impacting another. If you're the Chiefs, you just signed Drew Tranquil to 3 years, 19 million. I mean, that's a good deal. I mean, and this year, I mean, Drew's probably going to be considered an outside linebacker. So for outside linebackers, that's not fantastic. But if you consider him an inside linebacker, I mean, 6.5, I mean, that kind of puts him at the top of the middle class. I mean, it's not where Nick Bolton wants to be. I mean, but clearly, I mean, Drew Tranquil, that deal is Nick Bolton insurance. You've got Drew Tranquil in the bank so that if you can't keep Nick Bolton, you've got Drew Tranquil there. I mean, I think he's another one that for me is incredibly difficult because you're right. I mean, if I'm Nick Bolton's agent, I'm trying to top Patrick Queen's at least numbers. That's a very squirrely deal. But, if you're talking about 14 to 15 million per year, getting close to 45 million, pretty good. I mean, 25 million guaranteed would be a good number. I mean, maybe a little bit more so that it turns into a 2-year, $28 million deal if necessary. I mean, that would be good for the Chiefs to a degree. I'm not sure that's entirely what Nick Bolton would want. I think he would want a little bit more security than that. But there's a mark, and it's kind of like Chris Jones last year. I mean, in the last couple of years, you had Chris Jones was stuck between Aaron Donald at almost 32 million, and then the second highest paid guy was like 21. I mean, how do you set the market when, there is and if you take Patrick Queen out of the scenario, you're talking about almost like a $12-13 million gap between the top 3 paid guys and the 4th guy. I mean, like I said, take Queen out of the equation there. Bolton's so difficult. And here's the other thing that to me makes all 3 of these players difficult, Nick, is that the franchise tag, if you're asking, really isn't going to be an option for any of these 3 players because the franchise tag is just broken. And it's certainly broken for some positions. And these are 3 positions for which it's broken because there's only one franchise tag for offensive linemen. They don't break it out by tackle, guard, and center. There's one for offensive linemen. So, Over the Cap projects the 2025 franchise tag for offensive linemen at 24.7 million. You're not tagging Creed Humphrey or Trey Smith at 24.7. You might be able to convince yourself to do it for Trey Smith at 24.7. I mean, that would at least be almost a marketable deal, but it's certainly not ideal. And linebacker is the same way. It's not broken out by inside, outside. It doesn't exclude pass rushers. So there's just one number for linebackers. That's going to be the second highest paid franchise tag next year. Right now, projection would be 25.8 million. You're not tagging Nick Bolton for 25.8 million. So for at least 2 of those, and I think all 3 of them, franchise tag is off the table, especially for the Chiefs from and Trey Smith affordability standpoint. So if you're going to keep these 3 players, Nick, you've got to get a deal done with them. And you can obviously sign all 3 of them right now. I mean, the window's been open since January, but by mid-March, I mean, you're going to have to make the decision about, whether you can get these guys signed and get a deal done, or they're all 3 going to test free agency. And if they test free agency, the price is going to go up.
Mm-hmm.
There is. Yeah.
Yeah. No. Yeah. And so now we'll get to the next free agents that you've also got to make decisions on, other than the 3 that are the most talked about. Here's a list of some of the other free agents that they're going to have to make decisions on. Safety Justin Reed, who Matt hinted at a little bit ago. Defensive end Charles Omenihu, who when he comes back will determine how much he will be able to kind of prove what he can earn, whether it's with the Chiefs or the open market. Then you got wide receiver Marquise Brown, and you've got kicker Harrison Bucker. So each one of those guys is going to be just as equally important in terms of what they decide decision-wise. The reason we're talking about the big 3 is because it's the first time they're hitting the open market, while these other guys we're talking about have hit free agency, joined the Chiefs, or gotten an extension from the Chiefs like Bucker did.
Yeah. And Butker is, I mean, the easy one for me, Nick, because I mean, he and Justin Tucker, I mean, are the most nails kickers in the league. I mean, those are the two guys. So he's going to be 30 next year, granted, but hey, Justin Tucker's 32, was 32 when he signed his deal. He's going to be 36 at the end of that. And Justin Tucker's still kicking like crazy. No concerns here. I mean, you just, I mean, Harrison Butker has been nails for you. So I'm willing to go 4 or 5 years. Doesn't matter. Name your years, Harrison, and your agent. It doesn't matter. Pick your poison. You know it's going to be at least 6.5 million, if not close to 7. 14 plus million guaranteed would be a surprise based on where the market's at. So, I mean, hey, 5 years, 32 million would not be a problem for me whatsoever. And probably, if it's closer to 35, I'm okay with that too.
Yeah, I think you're pretty spot on that number, Matt.
I think we're both in agreement there. The one that and there's two that will be more challenging to a degree, but Justin Reed's is a really tricky one. It's going to be 28, but there's not really good hard comps for him because you look at if you're looking at just safeties who've signed a second contract at 28 in recent history, there's not a lot of them. I mean, most of the guys who have signed, well, excuse me, I apologize. Justin Reed's going to be a third contract. So you're looking at guys who are signing a third contract at his age. There's not a lot of hard comps, and because most of the guys who have signed a third or more contract are a lot older or just a little bit younger. Multiple contracts. I mean, Kyle Duggar, signed his last contract. He was 24, but that was a second contract, so it's not really comparable to Justin Reed. What do you pay a safety getting closer to 30?
That's the question that I'm very intrigued to see what the Chiefs do. I honestly I don't know. I think the number he's at APY per or the number he's getting cap hit wise this year at 10 million, I think that's reasonable for where his skill set's at. But I mean, I could totally understand if him and his agent think they can get better on the open market again next year.
Yeah, and Justin Reed right now, I mean, across the board is kind of like with his current contract is like the 12th best paid safety. Is that, a good number, especially for him getting close to 30? Honestly, I mean, yeah. So, let's say that's the number, 10.5 million APY. I mean, can the Chiefs afford that? I mean, I feel like that their actions have told us that that's not in the cards because I just don't know that you draft Jamari Conner, Brian Cook, and Jaden Hicks 3 years in a row unless you know and are thinking to yourself, hey, wait a minute, you're not going to have Justin Reed in 2025.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other two, I mean, I'm going to let you, Nick, because this one, I have no idea because we're talking about two completely unknowns here with Charles Omenihu coming off the injury and Hollywood Brown in his first year with the Chiefs. Both of them 28, so reasonably young. But, I mean, where do you go? I mean, where do we start with these guys?
I mean, if you're the agent for Charles Omenihu, like you're hoping he can get on the field as quickly as possible, show that his ACL is healed up, and then he's back to the player he was, or even better than he was beforehand. And once he gets on the field, then you have that opportunity to kind of prove that and to get him in a certain number of snaps. Because I mean, I think if you're trying to work with him, you're trying to see if you can get him somewhere to 12 to 15 million APY per year. And the sooner you get him out on the field, the better chance you have of hitting that. Because if you don't, then you're going to be looking at something to where it's going to be a team's going to offer like a 1 year prove it at 6 to 7 million a year, worth, and add in a whole bunch of incentives to be worth up to that number that his agent may be shooting for, asking for type of thing. So that's where I could see them having, but he's going to need to get that 12 to 15 million per year, which is, I think, would be a realistic target. I think that he's going to need to be on the field for at minimum October, November, December, and then showcase a lot in January to be able to get to that number, if not more. And then for Brown, I mean, I'm sure Brown's shooting for 20 million a year, but he's going to need an incredibly strong year, and he's going to need a strong playoff performance and to stay healthy the entire time to be able to showcase that. I have no doubt that he can, but those are the parts he's going to have to prove. And then when you look at what's going to be on the market next year, as of now, depending on how the Cowboys go, CD Lamb's going to potentially be on the market. Brandon Ayuk's going to potentially be on the market. Those are going to be the bigger names in terms of wide receivers out there. And then it's going to be really late in his career, but Deontay Johnson's potentially going to hit the market if the Panthers don't re-sign him, and then T. Higgins hits the market. So right now, the way things are situated, there's going to be at least two, if not three guys that can be outside possession receivers. And CeeDee Lamb, if he hits the market, he's going to be the most desirable wide receiver that's going to be out there. I don't think the Cowboys let that happen, but if they do, like Brown's now going to be fourth on that list, and I still think getting to 20 million per year is going to be really ambitious. I don't know if even if he has a phenomenal year with the Chiefs that he could potentially get to that point. But I mean, I have no doubt that they'll try to shoot for it. You know.
Yeah, I mean, with Minihue, it's really tricky to me because, if you look at once again the actions that the Chiefs have made, I mean, they've drafted Felix Anudike-Uzomah, and certainly you're hoping that if you're taking a first round pick, even if it's a developmental first round pick, you're hoping that in year 3 that guy is a starter. You've signed Mike Dana long term, so have you given the Charles Minihue money to Mike Dana, even though it's a cheaper deal? It's only $8 million per. A Minihue, if he has a good season, enough for Charles Minihue for you to want to keep him, you would probably be paying him more than $8 million per. So he fits into a different category to me. It's just you also look at it from another direction, which the Chiefs do not have a tremendous amount of depth going beyond 2024 under contract at defensive end. So if it's not Charles Minihue, then who? It's going to have to be somebody. And with Hollywood, I have no idea, because if he fits in with the Chiefs and becomes and I would say even $18 million per player, I mean, the Chiefs are not paying a wide receiver that much money. They're certainly not going to be paying a receiver $20 million. They're going to go a different direction because they're paying their quarterback to make guys $20 million receivers. They're not paying $20 million receivers to come in and play with Patrick Mahomes. Chiefs already made that pretty clear. So, what year does he have? I mean, if he doesn't have a great year, why would you keep him? I mean, it's kind of a catch-22. I have no idea of feeling what's a good number for Hollywood for next year. But the nice thing for the Chiefs is that if he has a good year and goes somewhere else for big money, there's going to be other receivers next year who are like, wait a minute, you know what? I work for Hollywood. I'm going to go play with Patrick Mahomes for a year, get my ring, get the stink of Mahomes on me, and then I'll be a $20 million receiver too. So, the next, there's two more quick categories to go through for me. And one, maybe a quick discussion, because we're talking about, the Chiefs draft picks. They've got 3 players who are also members of that 21 draft class that will be free agents. 2 of them have been on the team. And well, excuse me, I guess I included Lucas Niang as a 21 draft pick because he was, even though he was selected in 20, he opted out. So from a contract perspective, he's basically a member of the 21 draft class. So he's going to be a free agent this year. Kadarius Toney is going to be a free agent because the Chiefs did not pick up his 5th-year option as a first-round pick in 21. And then Kelvin Joseph, who is on the team this year, he's signed, hasn't actually made the Chiefs, but those are 3 players. And, Nick, I'm not sure that, I mean, they could go any different direction on all 3 of those guys. And I'm not sure there's really much more than a stab in the dark, but it might be just to keep an eye on them.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see how the year unfolds for each one of those options.
Just going through quickly, because we talked about restricted and exclusive rights free agents. Those are somewhat, routine. There's 2 that I want to flag because with restricted free agents after this season, you've got one interesting one, and that a lot of people will not remember. Najee Johnson is one of those. And the reason why is because Najee was released by the Chiefs at one point. And once you do that, you're no longer on your rookie contract. So he's on a 3-year deal, which makes his last 4th year of his rookie contract period. He's going to be a restricted rights free agent. Jack Cochran, Malik Herring, Justin Ross, Keontae Ingram also into that category. Keith Taylor, if he makes the team, would be in that category. Nazee's the only one I think that's of real interest. Cochran's one guy that might be an automatic, and the Chiefs obviously have been bringing along Malik Herring too. Maybe he's automatic as well. But Nazeeh Johnson might be more interesting because with restricted free agents, if you don't know, if you want to retain them, you've got to make them a minimum contract offer, but that minimum offer also corresponds to compensation if another team signs them. And with the increased offer, the increased compensation. Nazeeh Johnson, if the Chiefs made him an original round tender, it's a seventh round pick. I think the number next year would probably come out to like around $3 million for that tag. And any team could sign him and just give up a seventh round pick. Chiefs aren't going to use a seventh round tender, original round tender, I don't think, on Nazeeh Johnson if he comes back and has a good year.
If he becomes a starting corner this year, they will figure something else out on that one.
Yeah, that's the one that might be interesting. Exclusive rights free agents: Chris Oladokun, Mike Caliendo, Echo Boydo, and Matt Ariza, the punter. Should be, those there's not a lot of wiggle room there, but those are some interesting players. Especially if the Chiefs want to keep Oladokun. If Boydo makes the team, Ariza becomes a good punter, there's going to be some decisions to make there. Let's move to the next step, Nick, which is starting to look at 2025, and more difficult to project the numbers, but the Chiefs have very few veteran free agents for that year signed up right now. You're going to resolve a lot of those issues this year with keeping some of your rookies and who comes back and everything. But you're going to have obviously guys with 1 year deals. Right now, the Chiefs only have 2 players with veteran status signed for 2026 that would be free agents in that year: Travis Kelce and Joe Thuney. Joe Thuney, you kind of alluded. The Chiefs will probably make a decision on Joe Thuney this year. If they want to part ways with him, they can save $16.9 million. And all of a sudden, that cap space you're talking about next year goes up considerably.
And for Kelce, people, this is after the 2024 season.
After the 2024 season. So, whether it's in January when you can start negotiating with that rookie class. So in January, the Chiefs could start extending the guys like McDuffie, Karlaftis, Cook, Chenal, Pacheco, Jalen Watson, Joshua Williams. And then in 2026, the veteran free agents that year in your, excuse me, I'm talking about, I'm getting 1 year ahead of myself there. 2025 is, it's, my notes are all jacked up, Nick. Sorry about that.
So for people, this is the 2026 off season.
2026 off season. Yes. So obviously the biggest one's that rookie class, Nick. That's a huge rookie class.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So for people, I'll put this in a lot of numbers. So in the 2026 off season, so this is we'll already know what the Chiefs have done in 2024. If they three-peated or not, then we'll have gone through the 2025 season. So this will be done. So this is potentially 2 Super Bowls away, or 2 playoff seasons away, or whatever it may be. So in 2026, they're projected to have $88.8 million. The biggest cap hit, like I said, is going to be Patrick Mahomes at $68.6 million. Here's where the kicker comes in for him in 2026 is only $10 million of that's a roster bonus. $45 million of that's base salary. So they would be, if they did, they would have to do a restructure or extension or something to drop that base number potentially, to get it down if they need more cap room that season. Or they could completely eat it and just have that number be that number, and they don't mess with any of it. Because in the 2025 season, that's, from what I saw, it's one of the last big roster bonuses that they could move around to where the base is lower, but the roster bonus, they could move around probably 25.8 of it if they need to create cap room next year. And they have a way, if they want to, with Chris, depending on either roster bonus or base, if they want to move a little bit around there and kind of lock in his 2026 year at 32 years old if they want to. But to get back to the 2026 part, Chris Jones is going to be the second highest at $41.1 million. And if they just outright released him, they get $23 million of that back. So you hope, you hope he's doing great. He's on the roster. You keep crushing it. You pay that number. But if they had to get flexibility, then that would be the way they'd have to do it. And then Jawan Taylor would be at 24.7 million, and if they released him, they get 20 million in cap relief that year. And Mike Dana's probably going to be overpaid at that point at 11.1 million, and if they released him, it'd be 9 million relief. So they have flexibility right now to get that class under wraps if they want to, and start planning that out. So for people that are wondering from a free agency perspective, Matt already mentioned Kelsey and Tooney for 2026 offseason. So you got Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, and Brian Cook. Those are the three biggest ones you're going to have to make decisions on if you want to pay them or not, and you probably do want to pay them. So that may influence part of the Creed, Trey decision and Bolton decision is those three guys. So that you may have to move it to where you're paying part of the secondary and defensive line in that regard. Then you're going to have Leo Chenal, you're going to have Joshua Williams, Jalen Watson, and Isaiah Pacheco at that point. So what you're looking at, and this is for people that want to look ahead to next off season's draft class, the questions you're kind of wondering is who's going to be the long-term right tackle? Who's the short-term and long-term running back? Do you need to make any cornerback investments? Do you need to make any linebacker investments? You need to make some pass rush investments. Do you need to add anybody at safety? And you definitely need to add at wide receiver. Whether that's draft or free agency, those are things that they're going to have to try to start figuring out when they're looking ahead to their 2026 and 2027.
Yeah, and before I butchered again, Nick, the reason why, chronologically I look at the rookie class first is because beginning January 6th, which is 5 months away at this point, that's the point at which you can start signing the 2022 draft class 2 extensions. So those players, McDuffie, Karlaftis, etc., you can start negotiating extensions with them starting January 6th. So that's why the calendar starts for them much earlier than the guys after the 2025 season, the veterans, because the window opens up. That January 6th is also when you get to start making decisions on George Karlaftis and Trent McDuffie about whether or not you're going to pick up their 5th-year options. The deadline on that's going to be February 18th. So once again, not long away in the grand scheme of things, and that by February 18th, you're going to make decisions on both those. I would assume that it's an automatic decision on both of those, that you're picking up their 5th-year options, but it also represents the time when you can start looking at a long-term extension to see if you want to try and get those guys done. I mean, it's a trade-off, Nick. I mean, as far as the earlier that you typically sign one of these players, usually the cheaper the deal that you're going to get. It just means that you're going to have to pay them earlier. You're going to have to pay them up front. When it comes to Clark Hunt, it means that you're going to be paying a little bit more in signing bonus and cash in any given year. And that's another area that, we haven't really spent a long time. And that's almost maybe a separate off-season podcast at some point, Nick, is about how you structure the cash and deals and everything, because the Chiefs are not a team that wants to go out, and if the salary cap is $240 million, wants to go out and spend $360 million in cash that year. Their team wants to spend $240 million in cash. So there's different ways to do those things, but how they also get some of these long-term deals done is also part of that, because you can't necessarily sign everybody at once. You have to, do things in an order. That's another one of the things that Brett Veach has to figure out.
Yes. There's a lot of numbers, a lot of money. And then I will look further down the horizon in terms of 2027. Just so you guys know, there's only 9 guys on the roster that are signed that year. So, what we're wondering about in training camp with the likes of Ethan Driscoll, Curtis Jacobs, Reese Zammit, Fabian Lovett, Bailey, and then Baylor Cup, those guys are gonna be in the RF to ERFA range, or the RFA range, I believe, if they get to that point. And so, you're wanting to get answers from them now this year, if you can, to help you make your decisions in 2026 and 2027 about what directions they need to go. Because, like I said, they've only got 9 players on the roster in 2027 committed to them. And an ideal team likes to have about probably 30, 35 within a year or two of what they're going to do. So the Chiefs, basically, what Matt and I are getting at with this whole thing is the Chiefs have a lot more decisions than do you re-sign Creed Humphrey, Trey Smith, and Nick Bolton, because each one of those have a domino effect on Justin Reed, Charles Omenihu, Marquise Brown, Harrison Butker, and then the following year for Trent McDuffie, George Karlaftis, Brian Cook, and that whole 2022 draft class. So there's a lot of questions between now and then that are going to have to be answered in various points. But yeah, there's a lot for the Chiefs to decide if they want to maintain where they're at.
And one final thought, from me at least, for the from the perspective of is the cap real or not real? Mentioned at the top, I mean, the Chiefs have about $13.5 million in cap space for next season projected. They have like 49 players under contract. I mean, that one wouldn't even be to fill out the 53, much less a 90 player roster and all that. But, you're also at that point, to me, at least, okay, first of all, you got the 13.5. You've got the $15 million from this year. You're not going to be able to roll over all of that. You're going to use some of that this year. But, for instance, of just, using that, I mean, that can very easily, if the Chiefs were able to roll over 10 million the next year, all of a sudden next year's cap space goes from 13 to 23. Then you talked about Patrick Mahomes, Chris Jones can have their contracts restructured so that you free up more cap space. I mean, the Chiefs can very easily get to over $50 million in cap space next year. Mm-hmm. And I haven't even talked about the 16.9 from Joe Thuney if you're going to take that option. So, there's things that the Chiefs can do to free up cap space for next year to get a lot of stuff done. Mm-hmm. And they've got a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah. So, this is why for them, honestly, this year, if they can accomplish that three-peat, it kind of softens the blow of what they may have to do decision-wise in a lot of different spots to be able to try to maintain what they want from at least a playoff perspective, if not a championship perspective. And, look, even if they don't accomplish the three-peat, hey, it happens. That's football. But then there's just a lot of things they're going to have to do that are going to be tougher to swallow, somebody saying goodbye to certain players potentially, because they have to start kind of slowly increasing the draft picks if they can, or trying to get additional draft picks to be able to kind of fill a lot of holes they're going to have over the next couple of years.
Yeah, hey, in your projections, and maybe best or worst case, depending on how you look at them, in your case, hey, Creed Humphrey and Trey Smith are going to be $200 million worth of contracts. It's a tough swallow. Yeah. And that isn't even talking about, the Nick Boltons and you know what? I don't even know if we really talked a lot about Noah Gray. He's also going to be a free agent, and the tight end free agent market is also really crazy because, you could pay Noah Gray like number 32 tight end money. It's only $3.25 million this year. That's affordable to me. If you want to keep Noah Gray, but then you also drafted Jared Wiley, but Jared Wiley also may be your Travis Kelce replacement in the future.
Yeah, you drafted Jared Wiley for a reason. You're hoping he can give you some answers.
Yes, you are. Any parting thoughts or final thoughts from you, Nick?
Not related to contracts. I think we've exhausted that for the most part for everybody, and so you don't really need to ask us about it in the Q&A because we'll refer to this podcast for all your in-depth needs in terms of the big 3 contracts and where the Chiefs may go hypothetically over the next 2.5 to 3 years that we laid out for you. But at the time we're taping this podcast, we are technically 2 weeks away from the first public training camp practice. So, it is literally right here around the corner. And, the players will be reporting in less than 2 weeks, depending on the rookies and quarterbacks will be even less. So don't know if we're, You'll find out what day on that one. I'm sure it's already out publicly, but I'm not going to be that guy. But I mean, like you're less than 2 weeks away from football being back in full swing, from being able to physically go up and watch the Chiefs at St. Joe and be able to see them and kind of have that back in the swing. And then Olympics are happening on NBC within a couple weeks. So I mean, in terms, the Royals, depending on what they do, we'll see what happens, but the Royals have at minimum at least been able to maintain everybody's interest up until training camp, which for a lot of Kansas City and Chiefs fans, that's honestly all they really ever ask for. But I will say in the sports world, this is going to be a very busy week. For people that don't know, Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce are going to be at Lake Tahoe this week. That'll be on NBC next weekend. So for you locally, it'll be on KSHB 41, where Travis and Jason are going to compete. Rob Riggle is also involved. Patrick was not on the list as of yet, and I don't know if he will be. It sounded like Jason was potentially going to be a replacement for Patrick, but we'll see. So you got that this week. You got NBA Summer League. Then you're slowly starting up the home run. It's weird. Home run derby and the All-Star game are just going to be a couple days before the Chiefs get back into full swing. So, I mean, and then you got the ESPYs coming up this week with the Chiefs, if they're going to be the best team. And then Mahomes is up for best NFL player, best male athlete. And then Kelce and Mahomes are up for a Nickelodeon award in the fall, this upcoming weekend after the ESPYs. So, I mean, in a time that should be really, really quiet, there's actually a lot of sports and a lot of stuff that's going to be going on this week that starts to kind of slowly get you amped up for the fact that football is literally going to be back in less than 2 weeks.
Indeed. We are not very far away from being able to tell you about actual football on the field and some things happening. So, and you didn't even mention, Tuesday's Q&A. So, I mean, on the list of all the sports events.
And that's good. Well, that's every Tuesday, Matt. Okay.
That's every Tuesday. So if you have any questions about anything that we talked about today, if you even just want to talk about any of the 15 different things going on in the next couple of weeks, Nick and I are here every Tuesday. So the next couple of weeks will be pretty exciting because not only this week, but it is out there officially, Nick. So I can say it that rookies and the quarterbacks are reporting on July 16th. So the not this one, but the next Tuesday Q&A will have actually talked to Andy Reid, Patrick Mahomes, a couple of the rookies from St. Joe, and you'll actually have some insights. Nick is going to be super busy that day, so if we steal him for 15 minutes, I'll consider myself lucky.
Oh, I'm still off that day.
Oh, so. You're off that day. That's true. I mean,
I'll have some time. I'll listen to the pressers before the Q&A. Don't you worry.
So, well, we appreciate you. If you got any questions about what we talked about today, as always, hit us up on the YouTube channel. You can find us on social media as well. You can join us for the Q&A on Tuesday. We appreciate you all. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you Tuesday night or back here on the feed next week for 41 is the mic to get ready for training camp. And we got a doozy next week of some things to talk to you about getting ready for the season, and especially with the Chiefs trying to three-peat. So, everybody have a great week.
And until next time, I bid you adieu.
You've been listening to 41 is the Mic, presented by KSHB 41, your home of the Chiefs and Chiefs Digest.